The conqueror entered Babylon without destroying its gods. Then he built an empire by letting defeated peoples remain themselves. In 539 BCE, the gates of Babylon opened to Cyrus the Great, ruler of Persia. The city was one of the richest and most sacred places in the ancient world. Earlier conquerors had often announced victory through terror. Cyrus presented himself as a liberator. He restored temples, honored Babylon's chief god Marduk, and allowed displaced communities to return home. Centuries later, the clay document would be called the world's first human rights charter. But was Cyrus really history's first human rights ruler? The truth is more complicated than the legend. Cyrus was born around 600 BCE into the ruling family of Anshan, a Persian kingdom in southwestern Iran. Persia then lived under the shadow of the Median kingdom. What is clear is that Cyrus rebelled against the Median king Astyages around 550 BCE. The Median army collapsed and Cyrus captured its capital, Ecbatana, but he did not erase the people he defeated. Median nobles, soldiers, and traditions were absorbed into his new order. Cyrus presented himself not as the destroyer of an old kingdom, but as ruler of a larger one. That became his method. Next stood Lydia, a wealthy kingdom in western Anatolia ruled by Croesus, whose name became a symbol of riches. Croesus marched against Persia. Cyrus defeated him, captured Sardis, and gained access to the cities and trade routes of Western Asia Minor. Then Cyrus expanded east into Central Asia. Within decades, a once obscure Persian kingdom had become the greatest empire the ancient world had yet seen. But conquest created a problem. How could one king govern peoples who spoke different languages, worshiped different gods, followed different laws, and lived thousands of miles apart? Cyrus's answer was not equality, it was controlled diversity. Conquered peoples could often preserve local customs, temples, languages, and institutions as long as they paid tribute, maintained order, and accepted Persian supremacy. Local elites who cooperated could remain influential. Administrators who understood each region continued working. Governors and armies connected the empire without forcing every subject to become Persian. This was not modern freedom. Cyrus was an absolute monarch created by war. His empire demanded obedience, taxes, labor, and soldiers. People did not vote for him or possess equal legal rights. Yet compared with mass deportation and cultural destruction used by some earlier empires, his approach could be remarkably pragmatic. Babylon became the greatest demonstration of that strategy. The Babylonian king Nabonidus had alienated important priestly groups. When Cyrus invaded, Persian propaganda claimed Marduk had chosen him to restore order. After the city fell, a proclamation was inscribed on a clay cylinder in the traditional Babylonian language and style. The Cyrus Cylinder says the king restored sanctuaries, returned divine images, and resettled displaced populations. It does not declare universal freedom, equality, or individual rights. It does not abolish slavery. And it does not mention the Jewish people by name. Calling it a modern human rights charter places modern ideas inside an ancient royal proclamation. Other Mesopotamian kings had used similar language when presenting themselves as restorers after conquest. But that does not make the cylinder meaningless. The policies it describes mattered to real communities. Biblical texts remember Cyrus as the ruler who permitted Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. In Isaiah, he is even called God's anointed, an extraordinary title for a foreign king. To Babylonian priests, he could appear as Marduk's chosen ruler. To Jewish writers, he could appear as the instrument of Israel's God. Cyrus allowed different peoples to understand his power through their own sacred traditions. That was tolerance. It was also brilliant imperial politics. A restored temple could turn priests into allies. A returning population could become loyal to the king who released it. Respecting local identity was cheaper than constantly crushing rebellion. Cyrus did not rule softly because he lacked power. He used restraint as a form of power. His model helped the Achaemenid Empire survive far beyond his lifetime. Later rulers, especially Darius I, developed its roads, taxation, administration, and provincial system. The empire eventually stretched from the Aegean and Egypt toward Central Asia and the Indus Valley. Cyrus did not live to see all of it. He died around 530 BCE while campaigning in the east. Ancient sources disagree about the enemy and the manner of his death. His body was reportedly returned to Pasargadae and placed in a simple stone tomb. Cyrus conquered kingdoms, yet became famous for what he allowed to survive. He did not create the world's first modern human rights state. He created something distinctly ancient, a monarchy that discovered respect, flexibility, and local freedom could hold an empire together better than terror alone. His greatness lies not in pretending he belonged to our age. It lies in recognizing how far he moved beyond many rulers of his own. Subscribe for more hidden truths behind history's greatest empires and discover how the strongest conquerors sometimes ruled not by erasing differences, but by learning how to govern them.